The Cavendish mansion was the kind of place most people only saw in magazines: chandeliers like frozen waterfalls, walls lined with art older than memory, and silence that echoed louder than music. Ethan Cavendish lived within that silence like a ghost in his own home. Every morning, his mother Laura would touch his shoulder, lips moving with the words "Good morning, my darling." He would smile, nod, and turn away before the pain in her eyes reached him. In his private classroom, tutors used sign language and tablets to teach him. Numbers came easily, emotions did not. When they spoke, he watched their mouths move, but he heard nothing. The world was motion without meaning. At night, he would climb onto his balcony, sketchbook in hand, and draw the stars. He often imagined they hummed, faint songs carried on light years of distance. He could almost feel their rhythm in his chest, but it wasn't sound, it was longing. Downstairs, his father, Richard Cavendish, was a man of power, always on calls, meetings, decisions. He loved his son, but love was expressed through gifts, not moments. Custom bikes, imported instruments Ethan couldn't hear, even a music room built for a boy who couldn't listen. Every gesture said, "We're trying," but Ethan only saw, "We're failing." Sometimes, when guests came, Ethan hid behind the curtains, watching other children laugh and chase each other across the marble floors. Their laughter was like color in motion, and he stood in grayscale. His world was safe, beautiful, and heartbreakingly empty. But beyond the polished gardens and trimmed hedges, there was a different world, the servants' quarters. There, laughter was real, unpolished, sometimes messy. It belonged to people who had less, but somehow felt more alive. Among them was Rosa, the kind-hearted maid who had worked for the Cavendish family for years. Her daughter, Lila, often waited for her after work, sitting quietly by the back gardens with a small wooden box of trinkets she never let go of. That box once belonged to her grandfather, a tinkerer who believed the world was full of unheard magic. Inside were bits of copper wire, glass shards, and a single metallic pendant, small, round, with a faint crystal at its core. Lila would hold it to her ear sometimes, pretending to hear secrets the wind carried. One afternoon, as Rosa worked in the kitchen, Lila wandered toward the wide green field behind the mansion, a place few servants' children ever dared to go. That's where she first saw him, a boy with tousled brown hair, sitting cross-legged on the grass, his eyes fixed on a kite tangled in a tree. He wasn't angry, just staring, silently, as if trying to will it down. Lila didn't know who he was, only that he looked lonely. She tilted her head, then smiled and shouted, "Want me to help?" He didn't react. She frowned, waved both hands, still nothing. Then she noticed his hearing aid, and something inside her softened. That moment, small, wordless, innocent, would begin a friendship that neither the mansion nor the world could have predicted. The boy who couldn't hear, the girl who listened with her heart, and though they didn't know it yet, they were about to change each other's lives forever. The next day, Lila returned to the field. She brought with her a small red kite patched together with fabric scraps. The breeze was playful that afternoon, tugging at her hair as she ran across the grass. Ethan was already there, sitting under the same oak tree, sketching. When he noticed her, his brows furrowed slightly, uncertain. People didn't usually come near him unless they were paid to. Lila waved, grinning. He looked around, confused. She waved again, bigger this time. Then she lifted the kite high above her head and pointed at the sky. Ethan blinked, and slowly stood up. She gestured, "Hold this." He hesitated, but curiosity won. Together, they ran, the kite catching wind, soaring higher and higher until its tail danced like a ribbon of fire against the blue. Ethan laughed. It was silent, but his eyes sparkled with something alive. Lila couldn't hear his soundless joy, but she could feel it. When the kite finally dipped to the ground, she signed a clumsy hi, remembering a few signs her mother had shown her. Ethan's eyes widened, surprised, then softened. He signed back, "Ethan." She pointed to herself, "Lila." That was the moment silence stopped feeling empty. Days turned into weeks. Every afternoon after her chores, Lila met Ethan by the field. They communicated through gestures, drawings, and laughter that didn't need sound. She showed him her treasure box, filled with her grandfather's tinkering pieces. Ethan was fascinated. He examined each item carefully, sketching diagrams of them in his notebook. The most interesting of all was her pendant, a small metallic disc with a crystal center. It shimmered faintly when the sun hit it. "It listens before it speaks," she once mouthed to him, repeating her grandfather's words. Ethan didn't understand, but the phrase stayed with him. Lila began to notice things the mansion never saw. Like how Ethan's smile faded the moment he stepped back inside the house, how the servants lowered their eyes when he walked past, unsure whether to greet him. Inside the Cavendish world, he was the boy to be pitied. Outside, in the field, he was just Ethan, but not everyone approved of their friendship. One afternoon, as Rosa searched for her daughter, she found Lila in the garden, laughing with Ethan as they painted pebbles. Rosa's face paled. "Lila," she whispered sharply, grabbing her hand, "you mustn't disturb Master Ethan, if anyone sees." But Ethan gently stepped forward, touching Rosa's hand and shaking his head. His eyes pleaded. He wasn't disturbed, he was happy. That evening, Laura Cavendish stood at her son's bedroom door, watching through the crack as he sorted through new sketches, pictures of a little girl with messy braids and a red kite. For the first time in years, he was humming, not real sound, but a vibration, a rhythm only he could feel. Tears welled in Laura's eyes. She whispered, "Whoever she is, thank you." As days passed, the two children created a world of their own, where gestures spoke louder than words, and laughter didn't need volume. They played with shadows, drew shapes in the dirt, built tiny forts out of sticks. Lila brought stories her mother told her at night, of stars that sang and winds that carried whispers. Ethan listened with his heart, imagining what those stories might sound like if he could hear them. And every evening, before leaving, Lila would place her pendant in his hand for a few seconds, saying, "One day, maybe you'll hear what I do." He didn't understand, but he trusted her completely. The bond between a billionaire's son and a maid's daughter had become something rare, pure friendship untainted by the world's expectations. Yet fate was already weaving something far beyond their understanding, because soon, that tiny pendant would reveal a secret no scientist could explain, and one small act of kindness would awaken what even medicine could not. It was a golden afternoon, the kind where sunlight felt alive, brushing across the tall grass, glinting on every leaf like the world was holding its breath. Ethan and Lila were out in their field again, running barefoot, their kites soaring like two streaks of color against the endless sky. Lila's laughter danced in the air. Even if Ethan couldn't hear it, he could feel it, in the way her shoulders moved, in the rhythm of her breath, in the lightness around her. It was enough. But as Ethan ran to catch his kite string, his foot caught on a root. He stumbled and fell hard, the kite string snapping, the wind carrying it away. "Ethan!" Lila shouted, rushing over. She dropped to her knees, brushing the grass from his hair. Her pendant slipped from her neck, landing softly beside his ear. Ethan looked at her, pain in his eyes, not from the fall, but from something deeper. The quiet had returned, that endless, hollow silence. Lila picked up the pendant, its crystal catching the sunlight. A faint hum pulsed through her fingertips, gentle, alive. It felt almost warm. "Here," she mouthed, smiling as she leaned close. "It listens before it speaks." He frowned, confused, and then, without thinking, she pressed the small metallic crystal against his ear. Ethan froze. The wind rustled through the trees. A bird called in the distance, and for the first time in his life, he heard it. The sound hit him like a wave, not loud, but vast, overwhelming, real. The leaves, the air, the faint giggle escaping Lila's lips. He could hear. His breathing quickened. His hand trembled as he touched his ear, eyes wide with disbelief. Tears welled instantly, spilling down his cheeks. Lila's smile faded into awe. "Ethan," she whispered. He blinked, his lips parted, and in a shaky, unfamiliar voice, trembling like the first cry of a newborn, he said, "Lila." She gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Her name, had come from the boy who had never spoken it. The world around them seemed to stop. Even the air felt sacred. Ethan laughed, and this time, it was real. The sound escaped him like sunlight breaking through clouds. He turned his head toward the trees, the birds, the rushing wind, drinking in every note, every whisper of life he'd never known existed. He fell to his knees, clutching Lila's hands. "I can hear," he said softly. "I can hear you." She was crying now too, not from fear, but wonder. For a long time, they stayed there, just two children, surrounded by miracles. The pendant still hung faintly in Lila's hand, its light dimming slowly as if it had done what it came to do. Eventually, the sound faded, not the hearing, but the energy. The whisper stone had gone quiet, yet Ethan's world would never be silent again. Back at the mansion, chaos soon followed. Doctors were summoned, specialists flown in, scientists begged to study the pendant. No one could explain how or why. There ran tests, scans, endless theories. But every time, Ethan only smiled and shook his head. He didn't need an answer. He already had one: kindness. That night, As the household buzzed with excitement, Ethan slipped away. He found Lila standing by the window of her small room in the servants' quarters, staring at the stars. He tapped her shoulder gently. She turned, and before she could speak, he whispered, "I can hear them." She smiled through tears. "Hear what?" "The stars," he said, pointing upward. "They're singing." In that moment, the mansion, the money, the walls between them, none of it mattered. Just two hearts, one miracle, and a whisper that changed everything. By the next morning, the Cavendish mansion was no longer silent. It buzzed with disbelief. Reporters swarmed the gates. Cameras flashed. Headlines screamed, "The deaf ear can hear again." Mystery device sparks scientific frenzy. Inside, Ethan sat quietly beside his mother, holding her trembling hand. She kept staring at him, whispering his name over and over, as if afraid the sound might disappear again. "Ethan," she said softly, "can you hear me?" He nodded, smiling, tears glistening in his eyes. "Yes, Mother." Her sob echoed through the marble halls. His father, Richard, was less moved, at least on the surface. A man of logic, not faith, he called in experts, neurologists, technologists, even spiritual healers. Everyone wanted to understand how, but amid the chaos, Ethan only wanted one thing, to see Lila. She wasn't allowed near the main house anymore. Rosa had been warned, "We can't risk distraction or rumor." But Ethan didn't care about rumors. He slipped out one evening, barefoot, walking toward the servants' quarters under the glow of the garden lamps. He found Lila sitting on the steps, clutching her pendant, now dim and silent. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. He smiled. "Neither should you, but you were." She looked up, eyes shining. "Can you still hear?" He nodded. "Everything, even me." He leaned closer. "Especially you." But not everyone viewed the bond as beautiful. The pendant had become an object of obsession. Scientists begged to analyze it, claiming it could revolutionize medicine. Richard Cavendish, ever the businessman, sought potential, patents, prestige, profit. He called Rosa and Lila into his study. "My son's life has changed because of you," he began, his voice calm but cold. "Name your price." "Anything." "The pendant, please." Rosa held her daughter protectively. "It's not for sale, sir." Richard's jaw tightened. "Everything is for sale." Lila clutched the pendant tightly. "My grandpa made it," she said softly. "It's not science, it's kindness." Richard didn't understand, couldn't. He dismissed them, but his eyes lingered on the small metallic crystal. Later that night, Ethan overheard his parents arguing. For the first time, he heard every word. "He's cured, Laura. Do you understand what this means? We can study it, replicate it. It's not a project, Richard," his mother cried. "It's a miracle that could be worth billions." Ethan stood frozen at the door, the words hitting harder than any silence ever had. For the first time, he understood how loud greed could be. He ran, straight to Lila's room. When she opened the door, he was breathless. "They'll take it," he said. "The pendant. You have to hide it." She nodded, trembling. Rosa took it gently from her daughter's hands, wrapped it in a small cloth, and whispered, "Some miracles aren't meant to be explained." They buried it in the garden that night, beneath the oldest oak, the same place where Ethan had first heard the world. The next morning, the pendant was gone. Workers said the ground had been disturbed, the press had been tipped off, someone had taken it. But to everyone's surprise, Ethan could still hear. He laughed when doctors came with scanners and tests. "You can't take it from me," he said quietly. "It's already inside." That day, the Cavendish mansion learned something money couldn't measure, that not every miracle demands ownership, and not every act of kindness needs proof. Still, the incident left marks. Richard withdrew from the public eye, ashamed. Rosa and Lila were offered anything they wanted, a home, education, a new beginning. But Lila asked for only one thing: let Ethan be free, let him be heard. From then on, Ethan's world became sound and purpose. He studied sound waves, vibrations, and empathy, not to understand the pendant, but to understand the gift. And yet, sometimes, when the house grew quiet again, he could swear he still heard a faint hum, not from his ear, but from his heart. Years passed. The world moved on from the miracle of the Cavendish boy, but Ethan never did. He grew into a young man with quiet eyes and a voice still gentle from learning sound. Though he could hear now, he never forgot what silence had taught him, how to listen with his heart. The mansion had changed too. Where there was once cold marble stillness, now laughter echoed, music, conversations, the sound of life. He had filled those halls with children's charities, therapy programs, and research for children with hearing impairments. He named the foundation the Whisper Stone Project. Every month, He visited the small town school Lila attended, bringing books, instruments, and supplies. He always came unannounced. No bodyguards, no reporters, just Ethan, the boy who once sat in silence. One afternoon, years after that first miracle, he found Lila in the same field where it had all begun. She was older now, taller, calmer, her smile still carrying the same light. She turned as he approached, the wind playing in her hair. "You found the time to come back," she said with a grin. He smiled. "I never really left." They sat under the oak tree, where the pendant had once been buried. For a while, they said nothing, just listened to the sound of leaves rustling above them. "You ever think about that day?" he asked quietly. "Every day," she replied. "I think about how scared I was when it started glowing." He chuckled. "I wasn't scared. I was just alive for the first time." Lila looked down at the grass. "Do you ever wish we told the world the truth about the pendant?" Ethan shook his head. "No, the truth was never the metal or the crystal. It was you. What you did, that's the real miracle." She smiled softly. "It wasn't a miracle, Ethan. It was kindness." He turned to her, eyes glistening. "That's the same thing." For a moment, silence settled again, but this time, it was peaceful. Not the silence of loss, but of understanding. As they sat there, the wind shifted, and faintly, so faintly, they both heard it. A hum, gentle, familiar. They glanced at each other. The sound was coming from beneath the roots of the old oak where the pendant had once been hidden. The ground shimmered slightly under the sunlight, and for a heartbeat, they could almost see it glow again. Lila laughed through her tears. "Guess it still listens." "And maybe," Ethan whispered, "it still speaks." That evening, before leaving, Ethan pressed something into her palm, a small silver locket shaped like the Whisper Stone, newly crafted. Inside was an engraving. "Kindness is the sound of the heart when the world goes quiet." Lila held it close. "You kept it alive." He smiled. "No, you did." As the sun set over the Cavendish estate, its light washed across the fields, warm and golden. Two friends, once divided by silence, now stood side by side in perfect understanding. Because some miracles aren't written in science or sound, they're written in kindness. What lesson did you take away from this story? Your comment might inspire someone today.